Okay, so we only have 20 minutes because Ben was a jerk and took away our time. I'm not even going to begin to describe all the accolades of Eric, all the work he's doing at Stanford. But the thing I would just highlight is when we were designing the United States' first national strategy on AI, whose work did we really look to? It was Eric's work that was really the key backbone of our thinking when we were thinking about that. So thank you for being here, Eric. For
Well,
that,
thank you, DJ. That's very nice of you to say that.
Well, it's all true. That's the easy part. So maybe what I want to start with is a quick look back. You know, when we were starting this national strategy for AI, we were really focused on a bunch of the low-wage jobs disappearing, and that's not what got disrupted first. So how should we be thinking about the change that AI is going to bring to society now?
So I've looked at a lot of technologies over the past, over my career, 30 years or so. I think this is the biggest one yet. Generative AI, AI more broadly, and it's certainly going to be very disruptive. I see huge productivity impacts. I'm on the record that I expect productivity growth to grow about double what it has been in the past. I'm arguing with the Congressional Budget Office about that, and I have a long bet with Bob Gordon. But it's also going to affect...
Maybe just pause real quick there and say, what does doubling of the productivity mean?
So doubling of productivity growth. So yeah, people often blur those together. The Congressional Budget Office has, I think, a way too modest prediction of about 1.4% per year of productivity growth. I think it's going to be closer to 3%. So that still, I think there's actually, I think I'm actually lowballing it. But that would make a big difference to things like the budget deficit, being able to deal with healthcare. I mean, it just allows us to do more with less. That's the definition of productivity. And most of that's driven by some of the capabilities I see, specifically around generative AI affecting about 80% of the tasks in the economy, all the stuff that involves language, not a lot don't, and images, knowledge work. So that's the section, to your question, a set of workers who weren't that affected by some of the earlier waves of technology. Starting in the 90s, early 2000s, most technology economists call it skill-biased technical change that disproportionately benefited more skilled workers and less skilled workers were hurt. And you saw a growing gap. People with a high school education or less saw their wages stagnate or fall. It's not just their wages. Some of you may have heard of deaths from despair, suicide, alcoholism, drug abuse.
The largest drop in middle-age mortality
it's
is
scary.
partly this.
So this is not like just a measurement thing. Oh, maybe you're not counting, the value of Wikipedia, which is true, but it's also that real lives are being affected. The potentially good news is this new technology actually seems to have the potential to help less skilled workers, less experienced workers significantly. Can I tell you about a study we did?
Let's talk about the studies, because if you haven't read Eric's work or follow him on Twitter where he posts some of these vignettes, this is what you hear you're going to hear Eric is going to be quoted the most on this subject by every presidential candidate for this election.
You should run for president.
Immigrant.
So one of the things we did early on is we teamed up with a company, Cresta, and we looked at the rollout of generative AI for thousands of call center operators, looked at millions of transcripts. And the tool was being used not to replace the workers, but to supplement them, to allow them to answer the questions more effectively. And what we found was very striking. They rolled out in a phased way, so different groups got access to it at different times, which for a researcher like me is gold, because now you can do causal inference. You can see the difference between the people who have it and the people who didn't. What we found was that on average, they all benefited significantly, but by far the biggest gains were for the least experienced, least skilled operators. They had about a 35% improvement within just a few months, within like 3 months. The more skilled workers had very little benefit, and in between was in between. So this was a situation where it was really
it's still significant. Like I think 15%.
Yeah,
right?
Overall it was 14%. Don't exaggerate. Okay. So, but that was just in the first few months. And what it was doing, it was looking at all these transcripts, the LLM, and it was capturing the tacit knowledge. There's a lot of unknown tips and tricks that we don't even know ourselves that we use to answer questions. And it was looking at these millions of transcripts and saying, oh, this one led to a happy outcome, this one not so much. Let's do more of what leads to the happy outcomes. Some of it's tone of voice and words, some of it is specific solutions. And it shared that with the less skilled workers, and they got to be a lot better. And then there was a little thing, some new data, it's not in the paper yet, but this just came out that we've just been looking at. It turned out that every once in a while, like all systems, it kind of crashed and went down, and so the people didn't have access to the system. And this was another golden opportunity for researchers like me, and I swear I had nothing to do with making it crash. But we could look at what happened when they didn't have access to it. And I was a little surprised and interested that the less skilled workers, when they didn't have access to it, they continued to perform somewhat better than the people who had never had access. So they were learning from it. They were internalizing. It wasn't as good as when they had access, but they had actually learned some of the tacit knowledge that previously only the more skilled workers had. Now, I want to be cautious about generalizing that to every profession, but there have been other studies of coders, of consultants, and other places where you also see these very large productivity gains, and often it's been effective in capturing tacit knowledge. And you guys may know the term software 2.0, but I think this is a really big deal for economists and organizational researchers, because for the first time, instead of us having to know exactly step by step what we want the machine to do and write it down in code, we can show it examples, and the machine figures out what to do. And that unlocks so much more value. All this tacit knowledge that organizations and individuals have accumulated over decades is now increasingly accessible.
Well, let's get into something that you call the Turing trap, because I think this exemplifies some of the challenges for many people who are out there building this technology need to be thinking about. And I want to set a stage before we get to the Turing trap about a Gallup poll that was released just very recently that basically showed, if I'm remembering the stats correctly, make sure I'm not inflating anything.
Catch you if you
exactly is 3 out of 4 Americans feel that there is, so 75% of Americans who have been surveyed feel that AI is going to have some impact on jobs. And some, I can't remember the exact stat, but some significant percentage actually do not believe that technology companies should be trusted to utilize AI to the benefit of the American public.
Yeah. Well, this is a real problem, a real challenge, and I understand the concern. And the first thing I want to say is I've looked at a lot of the data. I don't see mass unemployment or lots of people being thrown out of work. I do see mass disruption. So we're right now close to record low unemployment, and there've been waves and waves of technology. Looking forward, I expect that there's going to be less demand for some jobs, more demand for other jobs, skills shifting around, and we need a roadmap for that. But I don't foresee like mass unemployment. But there's still cause to be concerned. And bring back to your question about the Turing trap, you guys all know about the Turing test, which is, can you make a machine that perfectly imitates a human so you can't tell which is which? It's based on the imitation game. Iconic idea that Alan Turing came up with in 1950 and sort of has been kind of a implicit or explicit goal of a lot of researchers. Can we make AI like that? Now we're actually getting pretty close to having machines that are indistinguishable if you talk to them, the chatbots. And I think we're realizing, at least I'm realizing, that it's not really the best goal. If you make a machine that perfectly imitates human, it has a number of weaknesses. First off, it's kind of a low ceiling. You know, technology can do so much more than humans, so we should not be, it's not ambitious enough. Secondly, in some ways, it's too ambitious because there's a lot of things that humans can do very easily, button a shirt, walk up the stairs, pick up a dime, that is really, really hard to make a machine do. And so spending a lot of cycles getting things that are easy for humans and hard for machines may not be the most beneficial thing. But the third reason, really maybe perhaps the most profound reason, is that when economists see a technology that perfectly imitates a human, that makes it a substitute, and that tends to drive down wages for whatever it's substituting for. Economists have this other concept called complements. A complement is something that makes the other thing more valuable. If a machine is a complement, then it drives up wages. And I think most of us would rather have widely shared prosperity, not just replacing people and getting productivity and having those gains go to the capital owners, but having it augment humans, like in the call center example, and make them more valuable, and then you get more productivity, but you also get more widely shared prosperity. So my call for all of you developers out there is, as you think about developing these technologies, look for opportunities to augment humans. They're not always there, but if you look for opportunities to augment coders, call center operators, consultants, writers, that will not only create more productivity, but also, I think, ultimately steers society a little bit more towards shared prosperity. And one of the things I don't want to see is that doubling of productivity, but have all of it captured by just a small number of owners of the technology.
I think it's such an important point that you're raising because in the Web 2.0, 1.0 to 2.0 crossover, we really realized that human-centered design was critical to make this work. And it feels that in AI, my belief, reading your work and sort of looking at the landscape, it really is that the Turing trap and figuring out how do we think about our engagement with these AI systems is going to be the essential thing. And it's not just quite human-centered design. It's something different of this, which you kind of talk about of making sure you're measuring don't measure AI against humans, measure it against the tasks.
Yes, exactly. So one way to develop a roadmap for all of this is to look at all the tasks that are being done in the economy and think about how can technology augment and help with those tasks. So this is something I've been working on for a number of years. There's a paper in Science I did with Tom Mitchell from Carnegie Mellon and with Daniel Rock, who's now at Wharton. And we looked at 950 occupations, and then we broke them down to what tasks do they each do. A radiologist does 30 distinct tasks. An economist, a coder, a kindergarten teacher, they each do a certain number of tasks. And if you look at the individual tasks, you can see where the technology can help them. And Daniel Rock, one of my co-authors in the earlier paper, recently came out with a new paper, which I think is phenomenal, called GPTs or GPTs, where they looked at the tasks that are affected by generative AI. And now we're beginning to see a roadmap of where these technologies can help the most in the economy. And I think managers, CEOs, entrepreneurs need to be looking at a roadmap like that when they make decisions about how to deploy the technology.
Well, let's take this to something that also, as we think about the macro trends for us, as we're building very inside our own little startups and other systems, is we're seeing this macro trend also of culture and conversation. And one in one dimension, you have this call center. Deploying this technology can cause both excitement, it can cause nervousness. We've seen similar issues in radiology and hospital environments. And also yesterday, we've had the first of one of two strikes get settled in Hollywood, where a seminal component was around AI. We have a major strike going on in automotive, where one of the components has also questions around this. We've had the Teamsters who are upset with Governor Newsom on self-driving trucks on roads, and this seems to be the beginning. Yeah. And so I'm wondering, as an economist, what's your advice on how we should think about this from a cultural adoption perspective?
I totally understand the anxiety, and because as I said, there's going to be a lot of disruption. At the same time, and I talked to some of the folks in the Writers Guild, I talked to some of the other folks, and some of my colleagues in academia, and there's a current of them that say, we've got to stop this technology, we've got to hold it back, prevent other people from using it. That's not going to work. That's never worked in history, and it's just a bad instinct. And I totally get the instinct. Let's try and save all the existing jobs.
So you didn't sign the letter?
I did not sign the pause letter. No. When I talk to them, I advise them, look, the way that America, every country's been successful is by embracing these technologies, but being flexible and learning how to use it to benefit people. There's always technology that's been destroying jobs, it's been creating jobs, there's this constant churn, and the more dynamic you are, the better off you are. So my advice when I spoke to the Writers Guild was look for ways, how can this help you do your job better? And my professor colleagues, I say, don't try to ban your students from using them and tell them to use blue books with pens and pencils. No. What I do in my class, I say, look, I know you're going to be using this technology. You're Stanford students. I'm not going to stop you. But I expect your work to be that much better than it would have been otherwise. And by the way, I have access to the technology too. So if all you're doing is parroting what that the machine says, that's not going to get you a lot of credit. And then I cold call on people and make sure that they understand what's doing. But ultimately, it forces me to up my game as a professor. And we have to rethink what kinds of new skills are needed in a world where these tools are available. But it would make no more sense to try to hold it back than to say, you can't use calculators or computers.
We got a very international audience here also. Which countries win, which countries lose?
That's a tough question. So I think that it's going to be within countries rather than between countries. I think the United States is incredibly well positioned with especially what's happening here in Silicon Valley to develop all that technology. But ultimately, it's going to depend on the users of the technology and the adoption of it. And that statistic you said earlier worries me because if that leads people and companies to not adopt it and not use it as much, then there will be other countries where people embrace it. And I saw some polls that people in China, in India, in parts of Europe are, well, not so much in Europe actually, but in other countries are embracing it much more. And as I said earlier, the people who win are the ones who are going to be embracing it.
Yeah, I just found that the Pew survey was 52% of Americans are more concerned than excited about the use of AI in daily life, compared to 10% who are more excited. So that was one. But you also have a startup who is thinking deeply about these things. Tell us a bit about that.
I'm trying to smooth so I moved out here from MIT, and then naturally, I guess it's apparently you're required to start a startup when you come here, so I went ahead and did that. Yeah, some of the folks that we did that research with in Science and Nature, we just got a lot of incoming requests. How can we apply this in companies? So we've productized it, and there's like what we do is we look at companies, and we can take an outside in using LinkedIn and about a dozen other sources, learn what kinds of jobs are in those companies, and then we do what I said earlier, we break them down into the tasks, so you get 20,000, 19,000 distinct tasks or so, and we can say, here are the ones in your organization. I see you have a lot of coders, I see you have some call center operators, I see you have other folks. These are the places where generative AI could be most beneficial to boost your productivity. So as you're like overwhelmed with all these opportunities, we can prioritize which ones are the low-hanging fruit and give you a roadmap. And basically every CEO is being asked by their board right now, what's your plan for generative AI? And we can give them a first draft of that. The company's called Helix, so you can go check it out. I don't know whether James Milan, are you here? Our CEO, I think yeah, there he is. So go talk to him if you want to find out how it goes. But the idea is I want to smooth this transition. I want companies to have a roadmap so they're not just like deer in the headlights, frozen, but have a plan to go step by step about what to do next. And ultimately, the companies that do this more quickly, what we're seeing is that this is not a leveling technology at the company level, it's a differentiator. And some companies are already pulling ahead because they're embracing the technology.
Can you tell us about a company that we'd be surprised that gets it? And why, what is it about that company that allows them to get it?
James, can I tell them about the contract we just had? So,
I can confirm
am I allowed
there is
to
a
say the name of the
contract.
company? Oh, okay. There's a large consumer package goods company. James showed me the contract right now, and
like making boxes, kind of thing. Like
no, they don't make boxes.
Okay.
They make stuff that you drink.
Okay.
and that you eat.
Is it healthy?
No comment. But they totally get what this is doing, and they have hundreds of thousands of employees, and they realize that they need to think about how this technology is going to transform their organization. So they now have a roadmap that we're developing for them that is very forward. I mean, every company has a bunch of coders, so now they realize that those guys can all be tapping into Copilot and doubling their productivity. They have a bunch of call center operators. They have a bunch of folks, everybody in their company is doing email. And there's a roadmap now that they're working on a lot faster.
So we just have a little less than a minute. You're talking to all these companies. You're talking to policymakers. You're talking to union leaders. What's the advice for the audience of people who are builders to advance and accelerate, if you will, their product development process to get adoption and to be on the right side of this equation?
So a few things. I mean, this is I think a pretty sophisticated audience. So probably most of you guys are already working with the technology, but get your colleagues to work with it. When I go to companies, one of the things that's been most effective is just have a hackathon where everybody, the secretaries, the managers, the salespeople are playing with it, and they will find applications of ChatGPT or Midjourney that even the developers hadn't thought of that turn out to be really useful for them. So if you can get them to spend a day or two, the emergent properties of these technologies are just mind-boggling. I'm so surprised when I talk to the leaders of these companies. They don't even, they discover new applications, and every company's going to discover it. Second, as I said earlier, I really think everyone's got to lean in, and you've got to overcome this 75% that's resisting it, and make it your ally. And it gets back to what I said about the Turing trap. If people see the technology as a substitute, the radiologist who heard about these machines, they're going to replace radiologists, no wonder they were resisting it. I mean, that was not the strategy to go to them. Not only was it a bad organizational strategy, but it's also a bad technical strategy, because as great as these technologies are, there's always a long tail of tasks that they just don't handle. Machine learning only works when you have data to learn from, and in almost every application, there are one-off tasks that just haven't been in the data set before. And thankfully, we humans are better at doing that. So when you have a division of labor between humans and machines, you can do a lot more. And if you understand that as a developer, and if you understand that as a manager, you can sell that to people and say, look, this is going to help you. We still need humans in the loop. In fact, humans need to be in charge to do that. And if they see it as an ally, instead of a replacement, they're going to do a lot better. But I think if you do those things, you're going to have a lot smoother roadmap. And last but not least, I mean, as I said at the very beginning, this is an epic technology. I use the term general purpose technology. GPT, economists had that acronym before it got taken over by you guys. But the steam engine, electricity, I think AI is the most general of all general purpose technologies. This is a game changer, and we're very lucky to be living at this time in history, and to be fair, in this place on the planet where so much of it is happening. And over the coming decade, I think we're going to see a bigger transformation than we saw with those other technologies, and we're not going to stop it. It's a bad strategy to stop it. What we can do is steer it towards helping humans, and ultimately it's not what the technology decides, it's what we decide to do with the technology. So please think of the Turing trap. Don't try to make it replace people. Don't try to make it concentrate wealth and power, but use it to empower people. And if it's used that way, we're going to have both prosperity and shared prosperity.
Great. Real quick, I want to thank Ben for bringing this community together. Thank you, Ben, for bringing it together. Most times people don't say thank you for doing that, as well as all the organizers. You can also tell Ben that it was a massive, colossal mistake to shortchange us and not give us an hour. And then finally, I want to thank Eric. You can find Eric on all the social media platforms, myself as well, and engage in the conversation there. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, DJ. Always a pleasure.